Been studying a book called Eye of the Storm, Embracing Conflict and Creating Change. And in fact, it's been popular. It's been a sellout every week, but Annette does have a few more copies if you want one, because it's very powerful work. It invites us not only into spiritual awareness, waking ourselves up to the truth, it invites us to become fluid between two paradigms. What we've been calling the old paradigm: blame, talk, right, wrong, win, lose, better than, less than, misperception, miscommunication, and conflict. And what we call the new paradigm, which is at least 2,500 years old, talked about by Socrates, perhaps even older than that, maybe even talked about by the Aborigines, where nothing and no one is against me. The universe is here to support me. There's total acceptance, absolute potential in the realm of infinite possibilities. What somebody else thinks about me is none of my business, and creative tension is merely an opportunity for evolution. So that's like big. Take a breath. There are 4 conditions in which conflict occur. And they're the same 4 conditions in which we are invited into evolution. So they can exist as they are, where we simply notice that they're going on and choose to make a shift into the new paradigm. They are defensiveness. They are competition. They're that right, wrong, win, lose, better than, less than. The third wind is separation, when we have forgotten or diminished our idea of the truth of our oneness with God. And the fourth one is misperception. When we pay attention, no big deal. They're just merely a signal that we can make a shift. But when we don't give them attention, when we either stuff them or ignore them, they can become those swirling swaths of energy that invite us into that stewing, brewing storm of life where things get messy. Messy isn't bad. It's only bad if you stay there. But messy is like a bigger signal that we have the invitation to evolve. So we have these 4 winds. The first one, defensiveness, requires the belief that something or someone is against us, that we have to do something about it. The second one, competition, requires the belief in our consciousness as our primary consciousness that there is a world of lack and that there's not enough food, not enough housing, not enough jobs, not enough money. The third belief, separation, requires, the third wind, the belief of separation requires that we somehow cannot reconcile what we see in the world and what we know to be true as principle. Separation is when we have an outer experience that doesn't match our inner knowing. Separation is when we forget that created in the image and likeness of God, we are whole and perfect and magnificent and awesome, even though we feel pain, even though we experience illness, even though we make mistakes, and even though we hurt other people. And then there is misperception. Misperception has these beliefs. We see something that's not true, but we think it's true, or we can't see something that's true, or we think that what we're seeing is what everybody else sees. We think that what we're experiencing is everybody else's experience. Like, have you ever gone to a party where you were new and you looked around and everybody looked like they were talking and laughing and having a good time, and you thought, wow, I'm the only person here who doesn't know anybody. I'm the only person here who's not having a good time. But you screw up your courage and you start to talk to other people and you recognize, they say, oh no, it's my first time here. Oh no, I didn't know these people before I came either. Like, oh, they were having an experience that you just didn't see. So let's give another example. Close your eyes and we'll engage in a very mini visualization. You were standing on the shore. You see the water before you. You see a boat. Okay, visualization's over, so come back. How many people were standing on the shore of a lake? See, there's 1 or 2 or 3 in every crowd. And how many were standing on the shore of the ocean? Yeah, a lot of other people. Doesn't mean you're right or wrong. You were just standing in a different place, but you thought you were all standing in the same place. And was the shore sandy or rocky? Mm-hmm. And was the water rough or calm? Mm-hmm. See? And what did the boat look like? Oh, it was a sailboat. Are you sure it was a sailboat? What was it?
It was a cruise boat.
It was a cruise boat. What was it? It was a rowboat, okay? It was a canoe. It was anything that looked maybe like this. It could have even been a houseboat. But the boat you saw isn't necessarily the boat that everybody else saw. The experience you had isn't necessarily the experience that everybody else had, although we were all in the same visualization. Let me tell you a story, because you know there's going to be a story, especially when there's a pope and a rabbi. Several centuries ago, the Pope decreed that all the Jews either had to convert or to leave Italy. Well, this caused quite the outcry in the Jewish community. They'd been there for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, sometimes longer than those other guys that the Pope liked. And so they demanded the right to stay there. And the Pope thought about it, and he said, okay, fine, we'll have a religious debate. You go to your community, he said to the Jewish people, and you pick your wisest elder, and I will have a religious debate with that person. And so the Jewish community went and they picked out Rabbi Moshe, who was the oldest and wisest of all the rabbis, and they set the date, and the problem became that the Pope only spoke Italian and Latin, and the rabbi only spoke Yiddish and Hebrew. So the resolution and the agreement they came to it that it would be a silent debate. A silent debate. And you think, hey, isn't that great? That sounds perfect. So on the appointed day, the rabbi came and the Pope came, and the Pope sat there and the rabbi sat there, and they looked at each other, and eventually the Pope held up 3 fingers. The rabbi looked at that and he held up 1 finger. And then the Pope thought about that, and then he took his finger and he went like this. And the rabbi looked at him and he went like this. And then the Pope thought. They looked at each other silently for a while. And then the Pope brought out the elements. He brought out the wafer and he brought out the wine. And the rabbi kind of nodded his head and brought out an apple. Well, the Pope knew he had been beaten. He had been beaten, so he gave up. He stood up and he said, it is okay for all the Jews to stay here. I have lost this debate. And later, the cardinals, when they met with the Pope, they wanted to know what had gone on. And the Pope said, well, I held up 3 fingers to recognize the Trinity. And the rabbi reminded me that we have one God. We have the same one God. He said, and then I took my finger and I waved to show that God was all around. And the rabbi said, and God is also right here. He said, I took out the elements, I took out the wafer, I took out the wine to show how we could absolve all sin. And that rabbi took out an apple to remind me of original sin. I knew I had been beaten. Well, meanwhile, in the Jewish community, all the people gathered around Rabbi Moshe and they're like, what happened? And the rabbi says, well, I'm not quite sure. He held up 3 fingers to say we had 3 days to get out of Italy. And I told him, yours.
Amen.
And then he waved his hand through the air to say that we had a whole lot of choices to go to. And I pointed down to the ground and said, we're staying right here. And then after that, some time went, and he took out his lunch, so I took out my lunch, and the next thing I knew, it was over. Misperception. Misperception. It highlights once again our need for words and how words bring clarity and how asking questions and actually having a conversation leads us to a greater understanding of what's going on in somebody else's lives. It gives us connection. And I want you to see 3 of my favorite questions, my big shift questions. Tell me more. What interests you about that? And then what happens? So let's play. I am standing on the shore. You say, tell me more. Oh, I am here on the edge of the intercoastal waterway. I just can't wait to paddle out in my kayak and commune with nature. What interests me about that is that this is my way of decompressing. This is my way of sorting through my worries and concerns. This is my way of being with God. I can return to my life renewed and refreshed. See how more words can add to. More words can give us a clearer picture. They can create that shift from that old paradigm where without words are like, what is that lazy Reverend Mindy doing standing there looking at the water? Whatever story you make up that's a misperception, it can shift us into evolution. It can shift us into a place of peace, a place of pure potentiality. That being said, haven't you ever heard, it's not what you say, it's how you say it? Yeah, great, thanks. We were just getting more used to the idea that more words were good. So yes, it is how we say it. Virginia Satir, whose name I like to pronounce a different way, has 4 toxic styles of communications, 4 toxic classifications for how we are. One of them is the placator, the person who wants to appease, the person who wants to please, the person who wants everybody to like them. The second one is the blamer, that person who's always finding fault with other people, who never takes responsibility for themselves. The computer, the person who computes, the person who hides behind a cool demeanor, uses big words and sometimes speaks in a monotone. And the distractor, that person who ignores what's going on and la 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 la, says there's no problem at all, doesn't even notice the creative tension in the room. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a family goes on vacation, and on their first drive, they're driving along, and the engine loses power, the car loses power. So dad, the blamer, pulls over to the shoulder, and he turns around and he looks at his son and he says, what did you do to the car when you took it out last night? And mom, the placator, says, oh, I'm sure it's my fault. I should have taken the car to get service before we left on this trip. And the son, the computer, says, well, you know, statistically, on this type of engine, there's less than a 1% failure rate. And the sister says, on my cell phone, I'm going to call for pizza. Right? So these toxic or seemingly benign styles of communication don't address the winds of conflict that are going on in the car, or in the larger metaphor of life, in the room, or in the larger metaphor, in our world. They don't address those things. Now, Virginia Satir says that 50% of the people are placators, 30% are blamers, 15% are computers, and about 0.5% are distractors. And I feel like I know all the distractors. because that seems to be what I draw to me. But anyway, what an opportunity to shift. But anyway, how do you know if you are have an affinity for any of these styles? Well, you tune into your body. There's body postures. You may or may not be on your knees. You may or may not have your hands above your head. But if you were to just try this on, put your hands above your head and say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, so you might have an affinity. I'm not asking you to confess, but you might have an affinity for that one. Or the blamer. Hand on hip, pointing the finger out. It's all your fault. Try it on. It's all your fault. And then there's the computer. Sit with your legs crossed. Kind of get your hand up here and look the most intelligent you can possibly look. And say, obviously. Recognizably. Discernibly. Everybody knows that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so any resonance? I'm just asking. And then there's the distractor, the person who kind of makes a big deal. So you got to get your knees together, you got to stick your butt out, you got to like, go like this and say, problem? What problem? Let's go to the movies. Problem? What problem? Let's go to the movies. Virginia Satir says there's a fifth style of communication, and that is what she calls the leveler. The leveler responds rather than reacts. The leveler takes responsibility. The leveler has a congruent message and understanding between their heart, their mind, their body, their soul, their voice, their words, their body are all in alignment. The leveler is contemporaneous. So the leveler is fully present in the moment. The leveler is not projecting something from the past. They're not leaping or fleeing forward to the future, but they're actually right here with you. She says that 4.5% of the population already are levelers. But we in Unity are bumping that up because we have a desire and know that we can, with the power of our choice, shift to that new paradigm anytime. We have it in our minds, we have it in our hearts. We know how to do it. Not, we already know this, but we know how to be levelers. Take a breath. Feel the strength in your body. Feel that assuredness of your oneness with God. Even if it's this big, we have the hope from looking in this room that there are ways to expand. Our capacity can get bigger and bigger and bigger. We make our choices from loving kindness. We make our choices from peace. We make our choices from faith. So let's sing the loving kindness chant as we come into a time of meditation.